So it seems like every week I'm talking about the same thing. Resurrection. And I can truly say that I think most of us, we believe. And we would add, help mine unbelief. Because we can kind of grasp it as an intellectual concept, can't you? But do you have it in your gut, visceral feeling that it's true? That it's true not just for Jesus, but it's also true for you? That's where we have a little bit of business with understanding. Because somewhere in the depths, we still think Jesus was different. Yeah, but only an expression. But he was the Son of God. Yes, but so are you. But he had all these special abilities. Yes, and he told you you have the same. An intellectual concept of it is not exactly the same as having that deep sense of the reality of it. Now, for today's scripture, I'd like to show you the movie. I think these are lovely, so let's see what he has to say in John chapter 20, beginning in verse 19. It's a nice video, don't you think? Now, I made an error. What I put in your bulletin, on the back of your bulletin, is from verse 19. That began at 24. I couldn't find a video that started back kind of where I wanted to remind you. We read some of 19 through 23 previously, but it's just a reminder. The first line talks about the doors being shut. And then in, let's see, verse 26, 8 days later, his disciples were again in the house, and Thomas was with them. The doors were shut. Interesting, isn't it? How did Jesus get in there? Poof. Don't you love it? Yeah, it's quite an interesting story. Thomas. Back in school, we had an opportunity. They brought in a Catholic priest who was well trained in the Ira Progoff meditation journal workshop, which was a meditation workshop. And he guided us through many meditations, and the process was you went into meditation, and then whatever you experienced, you journaled, you wrote it down. And I had several, what were for me remarkable moments in those meditations, and one of them, in the process of the meditation, I heard this voice. You're still doubting, Thomas. Would you ever hear that? Do you think that would ever be said to you? Do you never doubt? Do you wonder sometimes about all this spiritual stuff? Because it deals with sometimes things that are invisible. Remember, we started off with an affirmation. I believe in God. I believe in the Spirit. I believe in the invisible. It all begins there. You get an idea. You think it's a marvelous idea. Can anybody see it? It's invisible. You may visualize it in your head. You may try to tell me about it, but I can't see it. To me, it's invisible until you do something about it, such as buy that new car, marry that person, get a new job, until you make it manifest. But if you never had faith in that idea, which is invisible, insubstantial, there would never be the expression of it. It wouldn't become real in your life. It's amazing how many outer demonstrations exist in this building that have been part of my life. The clock in the hall, the piano on the stage. There are more, many more. And sometimes it's been parts of my life as well that have been the invisible become visible. I believe in God. I believe in the Spirit. I believe in the invisible. Here's Thomas. He's hunting, he's searching, he's seeking, he's struggling to find understanding of the resurrection. Understanding so that he could have the same joy as his friends have had. Remember, he hasn't seen Jesus yet. This is a new experience. He really wants to know that Jesus resurrected from the dead. But nothing his friends have been able to say has been able to convince him of the reality of what to him is an invisible thing. It's not real to him. Like us, he's looking for more than reasons, more than opinions, more than explanations and arguments. Charles Fillmore in the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary speaks of Thomas and says, he wants to know about everything. That's why he doubted. I need information. I need information to trigger my perceiving power. What do we call the perceiving power of the mind? We call it faith. He's seeking to understand, and understanding is a very important, one of the 12 faculties and one of the most important. He wants to understand about everything. Isn't it the same with us? Sometimes when you're this may not be your experience, but it's my experience, so I'll make it personal. Faced with somebody who's speaking and acting absolutely irrationally. And I think, and I have in my lifetime thought, well, if I could just understand. Excuse me, understanding isn't all of it. Sometimes they're just speaking irrationally. If I could just understand what's going on, I'll feel better about a situation. You're stuck in traffic and you get a little hot. Not from the heat, but from the situation. Just imagine if you understood that up ahead someone was injured and there are people saving that person's life right now. I think your attitude about being delayed might be modified a bit, wouldn't it? If you know the reason the plane's late. Have you ever had an airline flight and as you were in line to board the plane, they announced that they were holding boarding until they got a different airplane? I think somebody got fired that day because the person who handles the, what do you call it, the jetway, the walkway that goes up, he drove it into the door, and the door was now deformed, and it wouldn't close. You wouldn't want to be on that plane, would you? No. So they had to pull that one out Bring us another one. Once we knew that, it was a lot different than if they just kept us waiting in line with no information. How often understanding makes all the difference. He doubts because he wants to understand to the depth of the Spirit within him. To understand what really happened. And it's the same for us. We'd like to understand how Jesus did it. Boy, if I had the absolute secret beyond that we have to do a few things, just a secret to make you have a resurrection, to rise up into a different experience, into a different state of Christ consciousness. Remember, the resurrection is a rising up into higher consciousness of the Christ Spirit within you. That's what causes the dramatic things to happen. If that would just happen, wow. For us, that would be wonderful. But to then come to the realization, not only was it something Jesus said he was going to do and then did it, it's something that you can do too. It's programmed into you. The ability to raise your awareness to a higher level. When you raise your awareness to a higher spiritual level, you overcome an awful lot of things. You never solve life's problems from the same level that's causing them. The same level of thinking, of limitation, of negative awareness. I mean, we don't ever have any of that negativity stuff, I know, but sometimes it tries to make its presence known. Reminds me of an old joke years ago. I don't know whether I can tell it or not, but I will anyway. In convent, this novitiate, a novice in process of becoming a nun, she had difficulty with certain thoughts at night. And let us make them negative thoughts at night as she was trying to go to sleep. So she went to the Mother Superior's room, knocked on the door, and she heard a sound inside. Bang! Bang! She opened the door, and there was Mother Superior going, bang! Bang! Mother Superior, what's wrong? Oh, nothing, dear. I just had one of those negative thoughts. Is that how you deal with it? Yes, I just shoot them out of my mind. Bang! Bang! A few nights later, the novice was having the same thing, so she tried that. Bang! Bang! Wasn't working for her. She went back and she knocked on the Mother Superior's door, and she heard a strange sound coming from inside. So she opened the door, and there's Mother Superior going, eh! There are times I think we need to do that. One affirmation or one denial is not going to do it. But we need to put some power behind it. So, we want to be a participant in rising up, into rising to another level of awareness. We don't want to be an observer and only an observer. It's important to remember that Spirit of Christ in us is the same today, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. It's with us throughout this, what we can call the grand journey of life that we're all walking, experiencing. The human part, the human self. It's real content with how things appear, what's going on outside, opinions, Superficialities. Oh, doesn't the human part just love to sit and talk in superficials? Well, what's going on in your life? Well, you should hear what Helen is doing these days, and you won't believe the man she's... Blah, 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 blah. Is any of that important? Any of that life or death? Most of it's useless. Most of it's gossip. We don't care about the external of things. The real self. We talk about the Spirit. I believe in God. I believe in the Spirit. The Spirit sees beyond appearances out here. It sees what is hidden. Sometimes you hear in certain circles the word esoteric. That's simply what it means. What's hidden. What's in back of everything. There's a lot in back of just the seat you're sitting in. Yeah. What's the invisible part of that seat? The idea. The person who first had the idea. And then the person who actually ran with that idea. Maybe not the first person who had it. The person who looked at it in the catalog and said, yeah, we'll take those. Whoever paid for them. Whoever installed them. There's a lot in back of it. And it's all part of the process of you being able to sit in it today. Oh yeah, we have to also think about the person who didn't take them out of here. And one time the union told me they were planning on removing the seats, leveling the floor, selling the windows and chandeliers, and making this a nice room for dinners and dances for their union. Gee. I believe in the Spirit, I believe in the invisible, and that's what kept them from doing that. It's an amazing thing. That real self of you sees beyond the lack, beyond the limitation, beyond just this physical presence right here and right now. Now, if Jesus hadn't said that he was going to lay down his life voluntarily, that he might take it up again, I think it would be difficult for us to accept that it even happened, don't you think? Since we're not old enough to have been there, it would have been very different to see it. That's why for understanding, Thomas, representing understanding, wants to see it, wants to see the proof. But it would be easy if he hadn't told us ahead of time it was going to happen and then done it and people believe it. It would be pretty difficult for us to accept that he was not overcome by the crucifixion, overcome by negation and the bigotry, as many others have been in the past 2,000 years. I said Thomas is the disciple who represents understanding. If you look at verse 24, in verse 24, now Thomas, one of the 12, called the twin, was not with them when Jesus came. We'll hold that slide right there. Called the twin. Some versions of the Bible has his name Didymus. Didymus, that's Greek for twin. But Thomas, we would use that name in English. In Aramaic, it's Teoma, Teoma, and it means twin. Twin of what? Do you know of any twin that he has? I don't. Some scholars say, well, it's because of the duality where he believes and follows Jesus, but then at the resurrection, he doesn't believe. He becomes double-minded, doubting. That leaves us open to Thomas who has faith and Thomas who doubts. Oh, maybe. Then there's an old legend. Well, it's probably a legend, and that ancient legend is that he resembled Jesus, that he was Jesus' twin by appearance. Haven't you ever had people say to you, I've seen somebody who looks just like you. I think there are only so many of us, so many body and faces, and every once in a while you run into somebody who looks just like somebody else. Yeah, so we all have a twin, so maybe that's the case. But in the physical world of sensation, understanding requires proof. Verse 25, in this world, in our physicality, we want proof. So the other disciples told him, we have seen the Lord. Well, okay, if it was all about intellect and information, there it is. We've seen the Lord. Yeah. But he said to them, unless I see in his hands the print of the nails, and place my finger in the mark of the nails, and place my hand in his side, I will not believe. Thomas is from Missouri. Show me. Show me. He wants physical proof. When we put outer things, the outer sensations, appearances first, and rely on them and on the intellect, developing the habit of faith and developing real understanding can be difficult. If you're a scientist and you have a theory, you can publish your theory and then everybody else tears it apart or tries to prove it. But the ultimate is to not only have a theory, but then do some experimentation that what? Proves the theory. And so it's not a fluke, is reproducible. If you really got it, it's reproducible. If you really have something down, you can do it again and again. If you really have learned a passage of literature, I'm sure at some time you had to memorize something, and in the first feeblest steps, you could stumble through it, maybe get it right one time and not right. But if you really know it, it comes out because it's a part of you. So in the outer level, we want the intellect working on the senses. That's what wants proof. And it's not that factual proof is lacking. Jesus was there. He did that little popping into the scene. And did Thomas say to him, well, Jesus, unless I can stick my finger in your side, oh yeah, and also in the holes in the nail holes in your hands, I'm not going to believe. Did Thomas say that to him? No. He said it to the disciples 8 days earlier, but not today. Jesus knows. What does that tell you about spiritual awareness, Christ consciousness in you? It knows. It knows what you need. And then what? Provides it. What you need and provides it for your understanding, for your resurrection, for your good. It knows and it provides it. Where does sight originate anyway? It's in here somewhere, right? And it's been said, sight originates with the seer. How many times do you see what you expect to see? Or you see what you're afraid to see? What you don't want to see? Back when I believed in monsters, I saw many. Now I don't believe in discarnate monsters. To see the Christ requires two things. Maybe this is the twin. It requires two things. Must have the Christ Spirit in our minds and in our hearts. Thinking and feeling. They go together. They need to be conjoined twins to work together. In the invisible, and there's a whole world of invisible around you. You believe in some of it. You believe in radio? Why would you ever turn your radio on? There's no signal that you can see. There's no music or talk show or anything that you can see. But you trust because you've sort of learned from experience that it's there even though you can't see it. Same with television. Why do you flip any switch in your house? You don't see electricity. It's invisible until you do something with it. And then it's light, or it's washing your dishes, or your clothes, or sucking up the filth of the streets off of your carpets. I learned that in the 50s. My mother had a vacuum cleaner salesman come to the house. He was selling rainbow vacuums. Yoo-hoo, rainbow vacuums. Now, I must have been, 9 years old. I have never forgotten when he used that expression. The filth of the streets gives me chills today. In this world of physicality, and compared to the invisible reality, understanding allows us to perceive this resurrection life as one of the unfailing signs, wouldn't you imagine, of the Christ presence in you, wouldn't it? If you could quickly and consciously raise your consciousness to a higher level and have a new and different experience, that certainly ought to be the evidence of things not seen. Now, verse 26. 8 days later, this is when finally Thomas gets the viewing. The doors were shut. We saw that in the very first passage that I read. Doors are shut to the outer world, to the world of appearances and circumstances, to what's going on out here. But the mind and the heart are open to the inner truth of life itself. Can you imagine? If within you, no matter what's going on out here, you have an awareness of the truth of life itself, the truth of eternal life. How often have we talked about life? Life is eternal. Yeah, but it's more than an intellectual concept. It's got to be understood. And with understanding comes the aha. And with the aha comes the, oh, thank you, God. From the invisible into visible. This understanding, represented by Thomas, takes us further along the way of truth than any other faculty. And that's a paraphrase from Charles Fillmore. Takes us further along the way of truth than any other faculty. Second last verse, number 28, Chris. Thomas answered him, my Lord and my God. Once he got to plug in, kind of like becoming one with the Christ when he stuck his fingers in the hand, the nail holes, plugging in. Once he connected, he sees the reality. My Lord and my God. Out there somewhere? No, right here. Yes, right here. In me. Very personal presence. I believe in God. I believe in that Spirit invested in me. And I believe in the invisible. What an eruption of understanding. That is true through my Lord and my God within me, that the growth in consciousness, the resurrection to another state is possible and happens. It's amazing, according to history about Thomas, he became one of the most devout disciples after this event. He got it. By Jove. He got it.